We have the minutes of the February 13th meeting before us.
Make a motion to approve.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion? None. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, Supervisor's monthly report. For the month of February, we had revenues of $734,976.87. Had appropriations of $43,645.57. The checkbook balance, general fund checkbook balance is $283,701.68. Highway fund checkbook balance is $594,476.83. T&A account was $12,373.40. Payroll account $16,531.55. And water district number one, $3,155. We have my accounting sheets for you. Review. Just the comment on revenues, we have taken all the tax dollars that are due in the month of February, as well as the first quarter's sales tax, and sales tax was up about 2% from the commensurate quarter last year. Okay. Before we go to public comment, I'd just like to take a minute or two and say a few things. Over the last 8 months, we've, as the town board, have dealt with this natural gas exploration issues. I think that we've tried to be very diligent in listening, giving people an opportunity to speak, and I think that we have been very diligent in that process. We all have opinions. It's kind of like a belly button. Everybody has one, and you're not. If it's not right or wrong. It's a personal opinion, and I think that we need to always keep that in our mind about these issues. We may not agree with what we're each other's point of view, but at this point, neither one of us are wrong. I would hope that we can keep this on a level that we aren't individually attacking people with issues. And I know this is coming to a point that it's taking a turn that's not very healthy for this community. So I just hope that we can bear that in mind and keep going forward for the good of Oxford. Many of the issues that people are concerned about are not local town issues. There are a lot of issues that are state and federal issues, and I would encourage people to talk to our contact our state and federal representatives to try to get those people involved in the process. We pay big dollars to a lot of people to, and we have a board here, the planning board and the local town board, that even though some of us are paid a pittance, mostly it's for the love of our community that we're here. So the guys in Albany and Washington don't do it for that. They do it for dollars. So enough said. Okay, for public comment, we've had some people request a few minutes. We'll, as we have in the past, I will allot 30 minutes to the discussion of natural gas, and because of the number of people, I think we ought to limit each individual's time to 3 minutes per person. I think that we can say what needs to be said in that amount of time. And Paul Brennan is the first one that's on the docket.
I have two things that I want to say. I had three, but I'm going to drop one out. First of all, I'd like to submit a copy of my unanswered and unacknowledged FOIL request appeal for information from the town of Oxford. It is required by law that an appropriate reply be given to the New York State Department of State, or the town could possibly face a costly lawsuit under Article 78 of the New York Civil Laws and Practices Rules. The deadline for acknowledging and responding to my appeals request has exceeded the DOS timeframe. I've tried many ways to get this information. I get no response. Therefore, I thought if I put it into the board minutes and also gave it to each of the board members, I might get some response. Better hurry up so I'm below my 3 minutes.
Yep.
Secondly, actually I'm going to do my first one too. I have a hard time hearing, and I'm not sure if other people can hear. The last couple of meetings I attended, I could not hear what you're saying. I would like to ask you to either speak louder, or if you can get some kind of amplification in here, a microphone and a speaker or something. I've talked to other people, and they seem to feel the same way. That's just a request. Okay, lastly, in 2003, residential districts under the 2003 zoning did not provide for gas drilling and utility towers. Those uses were not covered or permitted under the definition of residential zoning. For some strange reason, the 2007 laws provided for potential permitting of drilling and utility towers through special exception permit. By definition of residential in zoning laws, which are our zoning laws, and I would like to think that you've all read them, but it says, number one, to delineate those areas where predominantly residential development has occurred or will be likely to occur in accordance with the town master plan. Number two, to improve the character of residential areas by requiring standards of land use and lot and building size which accurately reflect the existing and desirable development. And number three, to protect the integrity of residential areas by prohibiting the intermixture of incompatible non-residential use. But yet, in 2007, the laws were changed to allow this through special permitting. I called the DEC. The DEC is very willing to drill in a residential area. They are not biased. They will drill anywhere the gas company puts in for a permit. It is up to town to protect themselves. We have been given this gift from Governor Cuomo to use our home rule laws. That's why we have to be very, very sure that our laws will protect those areas. Okay, that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Ellen Anderson?
Some more reading material.
Ellen? I think over there.
I'm a much better listener than I am a speaker, and I'm more of a ponderer, so I hope I can do this okay.
I'm sorry, Ellen, hold on one second. Thank you.
I'm speaking to you tonight because I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated because many of us have been attending the village and board meetings since Cuomo announced that hydrofracking would be allowed in New York State, voicing concerns and asking questions about this process without response from you. The village boards listened to both sides, and they pursued the legal counsel from both sides of the issue. This town board supports the gas industry. That's how it seems. There are at least 1,000 people in Oxford who do not want our town industrialized, and there are perhaps something like 130 people involved in leases. You are commended at the meetings by the Crow guys for ignoring us as troublemakers. As elected and trusted board members, you're called to represent everyone that lives in Oxford. First of all, my concerns have been trivialized because I have not been a long-term resident of Oxford, and I've been accused of that out on the sidewalk. I plan to retire here in what I thought was a charming rural village and not an industrial zone. I've always lived within 40 miles of here all of my life. I love this area. I lived almost 40 years in Hamilton, and I grew up in the town of Nelson, which was once my great-grandparents' dairy farm. My dad was born there and purchased it from them. He converted the farm to a family-run Christmas tree business as a second income, much like you, Lawrence, with your maple syrup enterprise. He was a supervisor for the town of Nelson at one point. He was a conservationist. He was on the Madison County Soil and Water District Board. His greatest passions were his 100-acre-plus homestead and his family. And he would never have leased that land to any industry that would have ripped out his trees and built a well pad as close as 500 feet from his house for any price. I love the rolling hills and valleys and streams of this area of upstate New York. And I resent being treated like I'm an outsider. I've always lived here. I believe in supporting my community. I service my car at the Goldens, I buy my gas at Blue Ox, I bake at the NBT, I fill my prescriptions at Bartles, and I eat in the local restaurants. The only maple syrup I buy is yours, Lawrence. And I take bottles of your syrup to my sons when we go downstate to visit them for souvenirs from Oxford. I think Mr. Hemstraught can verify I'm one of the first people to pay my taxes when they come. I bet I've been first sometimes. I heard it said at one of your meetings that there are thousands of dollars of unpaid taxes owed to Oxford. How many of those taxpayers are long-term residents? Am I less respected than they are? I wrote a letter to the editor of the Evening Sun, and I asked 3 questions, and I'd like answers to those questions tonight. Were proper legal procedures followed when you changed the zoning laws in 2007? Do you plan to work with the village to update the comprehensive plan and reconcile the village zoning laws with the towns? And when do you begin this process? That's all I have to say.
Irving?
Lawrence, I appreciate your comments at the beginning of this discussion. I too am disappointed by the turn of events. And there's a difference between listening to people and dialoguing with people. And sadly, this board has listened, but it has not dialogued. The number of questions that we have submitted to your board over the past 9 months, somewhere in the high 70s or low 80s, and not one of those 80 questions has been answered. And any reasonable person would say, if I were on your board, I would want an answer to every one of those questions. They're the kinds of questions that leaseholders, gas leaseholders, and people concerned about the environment would both want answered. But we've had none of them. And I'm in a position where I feel like, personally, I've been played for a fool. I'm the one who's told the people here who are concerned about gas drilling, let's keep our criticisms within the family. These are our neighbors. These are respected. You're respected members of the community. We don't want to be taking our criticisms out to the community. We want to offer them to the board first. But after 80 unanswered questions, I'm beginning to realize that I've been played for a fool, and the skeptics are correct, and it's a painful admission for me, because I was the person who always said, no, 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 they're willing to listen to you, you've got to get through, they're bound to hear what you have to say. Lawrence provides maple syrup to the community. He must know that the radioactive brine that comes up in the frac fluid and then is laid on the roads, disposed of throughout the community, is bound to wind up in his maple trees. He doesn't want to put on the back of his maple syrup bottles, be sure to have a Geiger counter by your pancakes Sunday morning. I thought, Alan, that you, with a lease with Norse, would eventually come around when Norse went bankrupt. I thought that Larry, with your family in real estate, you would realize what happens to real estate in communities where gas drilling comes in. A few places pick up value where there's drilling. The majority of places people find their land unable to sell. Jerry, I thought, as a person who teaches science, you would come to the point where you would realize that the young people in your class are facing a future that they need to be part of, and you would bring them into the conversation. John, you have a lease with Chesapeake. 2 leases with Chesapeake.
felt sorry for you guys, but not anymore.
Well, I don't feel sorry for you either, because half of Chesapeake has just been bought out by a Chinese company. And when I see people driving around with, bring a soldier home, I wonder if you'll add, bring a Chinese soldier home, because your gas is going to go to China.
We will.
And it saddens me that you have not realized that there's a conflict of interest, not only between you and the community, but perhaps between you and our country. And I was under the impression that at some point, all of this would sink in.
At this point, to back up what Lawrence said at the beginning of it, getting personal, you just went right around the table, and I mean, you just took this to a whole new level of personalizing, absurd, at a very low level, and very absurd statements. Now, most of those 80 questions are, as Lawrence said in the beginning, and if they're supposed to be listening, maybe it should take place both ways. Most of those are state-level regulations. They're not going to be spreading brine on the roads. Maybe at one time they did in other places. They have not done so here. They will not do so here if the state regulations that they have proposed stay in place. So you're taking all of this and you're putting it at a personal level, and I don't think it's called for. I don't think it's called for at all. You can have a disagreement. You can object to our decisions. Fine. But I don't want to listen to any more of this. And I will listen to people who are against drilling gas wells, and I'll listen to their reasons and for their causes, and there are many good reasons not to be drilling one gas well in Shenango County and in the town of Oxford. I'll listen to those reasons, but not when they're propaganda, not when they're false, and not when they're personal, directed towards this board.
Can I have some extra time to make up? Thank you.
3 minutes.
3 minutes
I
are up.
appreciate
It was
that,
more than
Jerry.
3 minutes anyways.
That is the most I've heard from you in 8 months, and I'm delighted, absolutely delighted. However, if you check the DEC regulations, it so happens that there is absolutely no control over radioactivity.
Okay.
The only control of radioactivity.
I think the time is.
They haven't been released, so how do you know that?
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Brian.
I'm sure everybody tonight.
First of all, there was a letter to the editor this week. It was on the 12th. Pretty upsetting because this is what divides communities.
Right, everybody needs to leave their activist hat outside.
Okay.
Come in as a community member.
Correct, but I want to refer to this for 1 second here. This is what divides us, okay? There's a lot of misinformation in here. Now, the board, what also came out in the Evening Sun, and this isn't tonight's, and it's the county advisors waiting for court rulings before gas drilling moratoriums to the towns. This is the county, it's coming to us. Our board here has done exactly that. It's done their due diligence in risk management because your hands are tied because of some legal cases that are out there right now. So you can't make the moves that you might want to make until you find out exactly what the moves can be. The village made this issue of stepping outside that box, okay, and stepping into the danger zone. They tried to put a moratorium, and the moratorium did not work, okay? It was shot down due to legal matters. Then they put a zoning law in. Now, a lot of the accusations and things are saying that the board should follow what the village is doing. The reason the board isn't following, and correct me if I'm wrong here, what the village is doing, because it takes 72 days for something to be put in before it becomes a final law. That's 4 months, okay? And here's what I'm telling you. Out of respect for our mayor on his Florida vacation right now, we have not brought those legal matters up. But they will be upon his return. So I appreciate your due diligence, I appreciate your risk management, and keep up the fine work. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? Yes.
Hi, I'm John Olszewski. I'm from Sherburne, work out of Norwich. I've been to all the meetings per se. I try to get to every one. And I see an awful lot of misinformation, and I'm awful well educated in like waste treatment. I had a class 3A waste treatment, passed the 4A test. I just didn't work in a big enough plant. got an awful lot of experience, been in 360 permits, and for an example, 2 nights ago I see people represent that they've got a report out that says when they drill that a mile away from the drilling site they have toxicities. That may be very well true. I'm not saying that's not true. But he said because it's 1 mile, he put a point, and he says that 1 mile perimeter of that whole area is going to be toxified. And so he went to everybody's site that he could point out, and all of a sudden the whole town of Plymouth was toxified because of one report saying it's a mile. And he misrepresented that because it might be a mile along a roadway of a hill or something. It might have a drafting area that would create a toxicity to travel that mile and hang along a hillside and have a draft area or something. That may be true. But as we fill our gas tanks and we have 100% fuel right there at our nose, or we have our exhaust, those might be bad test sites also. You have to, they're taken out of context. One thing I'd like to point out quickly is that we have some real concerns. Just looking at the papers lately, Syracuse paper had 13 pages of taxes of repossession of homes, with about 400 or 500 homes per page. We had my farm. I've had bales in the fields for 3, 4, 5 years that I haven't used, and all of a sudden this year we just sold bales that were 3 years old for $25 a bale because people are running out of hay. They're desperate. They haven't got things. Things are changing. The weather's changing. I've given information to where Michael Faraday, the father of electric, predicted weather changes since 1820s. All the planets are lining up on one side of the earth, creating the sunspot activity to create us to have high carbonization of the atmosphere and those kind of things. And that was predictable before, but now it's like we're seeing the scientists argue back and forth, is it not, is it? And we're getting this misinformation. So now one thing I'd like to point out quickly and end my speech here is that we have 20 miles of Marcellus Shale up on Route 20 for 30 years. We don't seem to have a radioactive problem. We have a nice, pristine agricultural site. We have one of the biggest gas wells in the world in Oneonta, New York, which has kind of been hidden, but it was 30 million cubic feet at 6,700 feet deep, and it doesn't seem to be a toxic valley. We do have the sand oil presentation yesterday show that they have a tremendous amount of toxicity up in Canada right now. They've destroyed the infrastructure of a river and a lake and killing people with brain tumors. And at the same time, we have some things taking place in this country. H.R. Bill 450 is to vote out the Constitution. The H.R. Bill 658 is 30,000 drones to be put onto us with 600 flying hours per hour, 450 million rounds of ammunition, and on top of that, 2,700 light-duty tanks to our Homeland Security with another 1.6 billion rounds of ammunition. And yet we have no money. They're closing Army bases down, Air Forces down, but all of a sudden our Homeland Security. So are we talking about something to where they're toxifying us on purpose and using our natural gas? We had 70,000 wells in New York State that have been depleted. We don't have a cancer center out in western New York. But all of a sudden now we have production and we have a huge toxicity. What's going on here? So I'm just trying to open that door of ask some questions. Thank you very much.
Anyone else like to speak?
Hi, Rich Anthony. I'm just gonna, I own the land up across from Geary Lake, and I guess it's been mentioned here before, the people from Geary Lake having a meeting where they were upset that the guy across the lake that owns the land, at least the land, I'm really sorry about that. But I would just want to point out, as Lawrence said to start this meeting about these personal attacks, and this lady said that she's questioned on the street about that she hadn't lived there very long. Well, I've lived up there for 40 years. For 40 years, I've let people from Geary Lake come onto my property, pick my berries, and they've done it, and I've tried to be a good neighbor. But anyway, I haven't been an active pro-gas person, in spite of the fact that at least I can, in one meeting, spoke one time. Shortly after I spoke that one time, we're talking about the personal attacks here. I was right over to that restaurant over there with my wife, my granddaughter, and my daughter. I walked in there to eat, and one of the anti-gas people, in the middle of a public place in front of my whole family, gave me the finger for absolutely no reason. Now, so I think, I'm just going to mention this fact for these people that are think their feelings are being hurt because they haven't lived there long enough, or et cetera, you better look at within your own group and see how some of your own actions are, which some were shown by the way this board was attacked to begin with. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lawrence.
My name's Jeff Barrows. Most all of you know me here. I actually work for Norse Energy. I'd like to start with I guess you'd call it a rebuttal from the article that was in the Evening Sun. These are the words of Dennis Holbrook. He's our Executive Vice President. It's a response to the claims that were there. And that, you know, Norse is in Chapter 11 voluntary debtor in possession. And we're pursuing reorganization brought on in no small part by nearly 5 years' delay in allowing shale development in the manner permitted everywhere else in the U.S. where the potential exists, except New York. Norse has contributed millions of dollars to the tax revenues supporting local school districts, towns, and counties in central and western New York. Despite its Chapter 11 status, Norse has continued to pay New York landowners approximately $250,000 monthly to preserve the leases that we have. And for the record, all of Norse's employees are U.S. citizens, and most of those in New York have resided there for most of their lives, including me. Free speech is a right. Getting your facts right before spewing misinformation couched in bias is a responsibility. To this, I'd like to add, in my own words, that I've been there 3 years. 3 years ago, the gas industry and the hydrofracking, yeah, I mean, I came into an industry and realized there were major issues. The research and development going on in these companies, they do have a lot of money, most of them. And the progress that they've made is huge, and it's going to continue to get better. You know, right along, there's food-grade fracking fluids available. You know, one of the biggest complaints were the chemicals that were going into the wells. You know, they're taking steps to do that. Most of the time, we're held to a higher standard than everybody else. We wreck a road, we fix it. My whole life, I've watched the loggers trash these roads. Hardly anything gets done about it. You know, it's an industry that's been here. It's timber. It's the only renewable resource there is. So, are they held to a different standard? One other comment in the rebuttal to Chesapeake was bought out by the Chinese, 50%. They're a publicly traded company. So isn't Norse. There's probably many stockholders in here of Norse, Chesapeake, and other industries. There's not really much anyone can do about that. You know, that's just the way it is. Thank you.
Is Norse involved in the driving lawsuit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they.
I thought it was Askew.
It was, and it switched over, and I think Askew's still involved in a percent, and contributes, you know, legal team work to it.
That's being heard in Albany on the 21st, I think.
March 21st, is that correct? Anyone?
It's in my first paper, I believe.
I believe it is the 21st it's being heard. I believe that's the correct date.
It was on the court docket for
Thank you.
Jeff.
Thank you for your statement and your statement that you made. My name's Vic. I live on the border of your land. I'm a landowner advocate and board of director on the Joint Landowners Coalition in New York. And we would love, more than anything, to have an open forum here in Oxford with both sides invited, maybe to the school or something, where we can sit down and discuss and not yell at each other and go over the issues. We've offered that hundreds of times. We've never been taken up on the offer. We hear things like, our minds are made up, it's not going to change. And that's what divides a community. That kind of slamming of a door in your face is what divides a community. People talk about personal attacks. About a month ago I had some minor surgery, I was on some medication, I was in bed at night, I heard some voices. I thought, oh wow, next day I'm going to see the light, this is great. I woke up in the morning in my mailbox, which is about, it cost me close to $250 to build because I had to go over a ditch with the arm and I did all the pressure treated lumber. It had a natural gas, Friends of Natural Gas sign on it, and on the other side it said natural gas creates jobs. Well, I put a picture on EID's website of that mailbox. It was smashed into pieces and thrown in the road. Those were the voices I heard that night. 2 o'clock in the morning, I had people drive by my house almost 2 years ago. They stopped, they laid on the horns. I don't know if it was firecrackers or gunshots, but to me, I've heard a lot of gunshots, and I think they were shooting guns in the air. That's the kind of thing that we've been facing against. This is the kind of things that are coming to our communities. Your community, my community, this is the kind of dissent that's happening between pro and con, and it shouldn't be that way. It should be educational. They're having an educational forum in Norwich tomorrow. It's a cookie party where they go and they listen to themselves talk and they pat each other on the back. I'd love to go to that. I'd love to hear what they have to say, but they know me, and if I raise my hand, I'm not called on because they don't want it heard. I've been to these meetings where they have 3x5 cards. Just to make this short, you should have a forum right here in the community where it's in school or someplace where a lot of people come from the community, and they can have people from their side, people from our side, sitting up front, let the audience ask questions, and whoever's most suitable to ask that question, and then rebut, do so. Because it's time facts and science, I don't know who the science teacher is, you? Yeah. The facts and science need to prevail, not the fear-mongering that's going on, and that's the biggest problem in this, is the fear-mongering. Radioactive salt in the streets, David's logic. I know farmers that are dumping this stuff in New York on land illegally. If that were true, by law, David's Lodge is to report that to the police, and I can find him in a meeting on this. Dave, have you ever told the police, or called the police when this is going on? I'm not talking to you. That's the problem. That's the problem right there.
Anyone else?
Did you speak twice?
No? Okay. Mina, I'm sorry.
I'm taking it personal about that FOIL request thing, okay, just so you know. Okay.
First, I'm the organizer of the forum tomorrow night. The cookie party. There will be cookies, I think. And you are definitely welcome to come. The whole community is welcome to come, and there will be a question and answer period at the end. And we will call on members who have, of the audience who have questions for our presenter.
I made that statement because when you had the one in the church over here the last time, I was practically walked out of the place.
Well, I'm running a different show.
Okay, let's get on to it.
First, this is non-guest related. I noticed a public notice in the Evening Sun about a quarantine on dogs. And it's signed by you, and I think it's maybe it was in February or so. And I was curious if this had to do, if this would also apply to coyote hunters and their dogs. Because we have an issue, and you've heard from Louise and Ernie.
Can you speak up, please?
I'm sorry. I'm talking about quarantine on dogs. There's a public notice actually that's posted on the window. And I was wondering about enforcement, or who do I call if a situation like that?
Dog control officer, DEC, any police or peace officer can, because of the quarantine, can act.
Well, this is a county law.
Correct.
So I was wondering if I called the county sheriff.
Sheriff Department, yeah, any of the police agencies.
Okay. Thank you. I also wanted to ask again about the road preservation laws. At the last meeting, I provided a few templates for road preservation laws, and I think that, the gentleman who mentioned the problem, Jeff, who mentioned the problem with loggers. It is a problem, and I think that it's something really worth looking into. McDonough has a road preservation law, New Berlin, and I provided a few templates, and I'd brought this up many times at meetings here, and I appreciate some kind of a response. I don't have to keep bringing it up.
Well, it's the feeling of this board and many of the people that I have talked with as far as legal advice, that a town such as Oxford without a police force, it's very difficult for us to enforce any local law. If we have a local road law, the New York State Police won't enforce it, the Sheriff's Department won't enforce it, so what good is it? The other issue is we do not want to target any one particular industry. We can't. That's illegal.
Well, the templates that I gave you look at all heavy industry, including logging.
But most of New York State is taking care of overweight truck permits, our permits, and on into the night. They can enforce that, but how do we enforce it here? If we could have a law that you can't drive anything more than a half-ton pickup on the roads, but can we stop it?
We actually have an attorney who's looking into that question, and when I get that information, I'll forward it to you. Thank you. The third thing that's associated with what I passed around is I'm requesting that the town board look into enacting a ban on gas well brining of Oxford roads. And Mr. Locke, it's actually already been approved by the DEC. I can forward you a map of the roads that DEC has already approved for gas well brining, and in fact, I believe it's already commenced for 2 years. And this is material that has been brought up from Pennsylvania, and I'll get you that information. I think that we all agree that the stuff that's coming up from these wells is nothing we want on our roads, and I appreciate you looking into that matter as well. Thank you.
Yeah, the reason I'm standing up here is in this atmosphere of cooperation. I was standing right there, and I got stood right in front of, so that I couldn't even see what the heck was going on. Yeah, you paid a lot of attention, so that I really appreciate that start.
So we need amplification to meet.
Yeah, well, they make hearing aids.
What's that?
Okay, nothing.
Whatever you say is nothing.
Lawrence, I haven't been that concerned about where I have purchased my maple syrup before, but you can figure that now I will be buying my maple syrup from you, and I'd be willing to bet that everybody in here that has an interest in what's going on will be doing that. So I hope it's a good year for making maple syrup, because I think you're going to sell more than you've ever sold before.
It'd be nice if it just started.
Yes, it would, and I totally understand that, and hopefully it will, and
That's 2
everything will
minutes,
work out really good in that, and you won't have to worry about those poison trees. Jim, Al, John, Jerry, Larry, and Lawrence. I'd like to thank you for putting up with the abuse and the amount of agitation that you've had to deal with here. We truly appreciate it from those of us that look at things objectively, and it's nice to have a board that will look at things that way and not be swayed or make up their mind way ahead of time of what they're going to do. So I would just like to say thank you, and it's time that you got the support that y'all deserve, and that's what we're here now starting to do. We've been in a defensive mode. When I say we, I'm referring to the people that are pro-natural gas development, which you should make no mistake about right now, that includes me. And a lot of other people here tonight. I think you'll notice it's a little more even tonight than it normally has been. Usually it's 2 or 3 of us that show up at the meetings and working at a defensive posture to sit here just to try to counter some of the misinformation and inaccurate information, and basically get right down to the point where if you wanted to, you could call it lies that you guys are being told. And what we're here now, what our objective is we're going to quit playing defense. Went to a couple of meetings recently, and we sat there and got really PO'd about the way things were going over and over again. Last one being Monday night in McDonough, with Slotchy there selling the same thing to that board up there about the idea of putting a moratorium in McDonough. And the paper, like Brian had said in the paper tonight, the county is recommending that's not the way to go. I'd like to tell you a little story that seems to be very appropriate to what we've been dealing with here. I was looking at some stuff here not too long ago, and there was a restaurant owner that decided to sell frog legs. So he put an ad in the paper for frogs. And this young man called up and said, hey, I can supply you with 50 frogs a day. It should be no problem. I have that pond at home with all the noise that those frogs are making. I can do that for you. I can supply you 50 frogs a day. So next day the boy comes in and he has 5 frogs. The owner says, well, what's this? That's only like 10% of what you said you could bring in out of that 50. And the boy gets kind of sheepish about the whole thing. He says, yeah, I'm sorry. He says, I can't believe 5 frogs can make that much noise. And I think you can put that where it deserves to be. And unfortunately, a lot of the people here would be represented by that 5 frog analogy there. They despise progress and prosperity. They don't want Oxford to survive and thrive. They want it to die a slow, agonizing death with no young people picking up where their parents leave off. And I look basically at one person that started this whole issue. And don't want to get personal, I won't name names. If anybody can figure it out on their own, they'll be able to do that. They got people from Gary Lake, or not they, that person got Gary Lake involved with this whole thing. beat up the village over it. They already had somebody had their mind made up with the mayor there, so he went along with it anyways. So regardless, and got that group from Lake Gary up there. They come down with their colored shirts and all that sort of stuff. I don't see that group here tonight. They're not in the strength that they were, and why not? They should be. If they really mean what they say and what they're looking at, why aren't they here supporting it? It's a pretty even audience out there tonight. And people, we said, you have to start coming down here, because what we're going to start doing is we're not going to play defense anymore. We're going to come up here. We're going to start giving you guys current information. We're going to take it to you, and we're not going to sit there and argue with, no, that's not true, that's not the way it's going. What we're going to do is bring you stuff that's this year's data. It's current information. It's not stuff like you talk about a meeting that's tomorrow night. As an example, there's a postcard sent out that I got in my mailbox. On the front of that postcard, there's a picture on there of a well site. Shows a nice little farmhouse and a derrick on the other side and all that sort of stuff. Picture on that thing, that meeting's tomorrow night. The picture on that thing, October of 2010. Not very representative of what's going on that property today. And we will be able to show you shortly what that property looks like today. So if this isn't propaganda and an illusion, then I don't know what is. So at any rate, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Shoot, I got a couple more things here. As far as the, I'll make it, give it just a little more.
You're up to 12 minutes.
Final last one, it's okay. A couple of things had already been said that basically there's a good argument to. One with Chesapeake, it's not half of Chesapeake that was sold. It was half of one of their holdings that was sold to a Chinese company. So it's not half of the company. As far as thousands of numbers on petitions and things like that. And it's like, oh, voters, and there's only a couple of hundred voters that voted in the last election. The reason there's only a couple of hundred people voting in those elections is because they were happy with the way you guys were doing your job. And that's why people don't come out. When they're satisfied with what's going on, nobody's running against them because they don't figure they have a chance of winning a race against the people that are already here. Then that's why there aren't the numbers out. And that's just the way that works. All right?
Running unopposed helps too.
Thanks. Running unopposed doesn't hurt.
Sit down.
Yeah, I had no plans to speak, and you'll have to excuse me because I have to lean against the wall. I'm going through vertigo. I'm here because I'm just supporting myself. I'm just going to give you what I know. I know that Syracuse was just given a $1.3 million grant to take the water off the Carrier Dome to keep that water from running into the lake because of the contaminants in the air that are now in the water. And it's going to be used in the flush toilets and the bathrooms. They're trying to save water. The EPA just gave our local towns grant money to clean up their wastewater of nitrogen and phosphorus, which are fertilizer components. But once again, they're trying to improve the quality of the water. Why are they going to such extents to improve the quality of our water if we're going to give billions of gallons to hydrofracking? The commodity of the future is going to be water, not fuel, because we are going to run out of water. All this stuff, the rain and heavy stuff, looks great, but it flows downstream and it's gone. The commodity is going to be water. Look at science changes. Right now, we're cleaning up messes from before. All Love Canal, there are thousands of examples where we thought the chemicals or whatever was going on was perfectly safe. Even your toothpaste has changed because we thought those chemicals were safe and they've been proven not to be. Science moves forward. Why don't we just take time and figure out where this is going? I'm not saying it's not safe. I'm not saying it is safe. I think we need more time for science to really look at factors that we haven't looked at yet. That's all I have to say.
Anyone else?
I'm one of the few people here who can't vote. I'm a foreigner, but I live in this village, or the town rather, and I think it would be a good idea, like that woman has just said, not to rush into this, but to wait. The oil will be there in 5 years' time. It'll be there in 10 years' time, but we don't have to take it out this year. This chap from the North was saying they're improving the techniques. Well, they haven't improved them enough yet, I don't think. I think we've got to wait. You'll still get your money, but you're going to may have to wait. That's all. Thank you.
Fred?
My name is Fred Lanphier, and once again, I came up shutting my mouth and saying, don't say a word. And yet, I'm standing up to say, I won't use my full 12 minutes. That's the last sarcastic remark I'll make.
Fred, I thought we got over that. If you want more, I'm more than willing to get back into the game, man.
I just want to say, if you would allow me to...
You're not talking to us, you're talking to them. How about that for a start?
Okay, I'll do that.
That's the way it's supposed to work here. If we're going to make this an open forum, let's do it.
If they would allow me to speak as a non-native, but a person who's interested in the history of Oxford and is delving into it in recent years, and I think has a long view of Oxford here. But the situation here over this issue has reached the point where every person in this room, I believe, has agonized a bit at the front end of their own decision making. But I think, I don't know about the board, but every other person in the room, I suspect, has reached a decision. And so, and the point where none of us can stand and speak anymore without knowing that we're antagonizing at least 50% of the people in the room. And here tonight, I think antagonizing well over 50% of the room. And but I don't want a yay boo session or applause. I just want to say that I just think this is terrible. It's reached this point locally. And
whose fault is that?
We were respectful enough to stand here and listen to you.
He wants to be argumentative with me.
We're going well beyond the 30 minutes that we allowed for this.
I do not. You know what?
You can't get beyond that. Say what you want to say.
Sorry, I'm done.
To us.
I'll be quiet. Just you talk to the board. I'll shut up.
Thank you. No, you know what? I just have to say, Will. I respect Will as much as anybody in the whole town of Oxford. Ever since he was a kid, I've admired the guy, and I respect him. And we have sharp disagreements over this, and so that's the way it is. And that's almost, a microcosm of the community. People who were once close friends are no longer close friends. And I know right now that I've, antagonizing some people, and maybe even losing friends because I'm on the side of Ellen and so on. I'm a foot dragger on this fracking. I don't think I'm a yellow dog anti-fracker, but I'm foot dragging. In New York State history and the national history, we have a long history of extraction industries. From cutting off our lumber in the 1st century, we came west of the Hudson here, and taking nearly another century to catch up with the damage done by that, to the dumping and so on. We could use the Love Canal and other situations from our past history to the reclamation necessary just a few miles from here in Pennsylvania, from the coal industry. And so we do have some examples. We don't know the future, though. But people like me who still don't catch on why my neighbor can go down under his property and take land, make a profit on my property. That's we're foot draggers on this, and we're still suspicious.
Right, excuse me, but that issue is one of those I spoke about. We cannot control that.
I know that.
Go to Albany and talk to the people there. Go to the federal government. Talk to those people.
Thank you, Leonard. There's another.
This board, I do not believe have made any statements as to saying yay or nay to gas.
That was, you're leading right into the only thing I was going to stand up and say was, I think actually most of this whole issue is now out of our hands, in the hands of various legal and political teams and legal and political maneuverings. And to damage each other, to damage this community anymore is, I think, very regrettable. And I think we could still avoid it. We had a couple of people here talking about calm debate. We could still reach that point. And so I'll stop there, but...
Fred, that's the original comment that we came and made at the beginning of this entire thing. We didn't take it to the next level.
That's great.
No, it's
Thank
not.
you very much.
Okay.
It's not great?
Anybody else who wants to speak to the board?
Okay.
All right, thank you.
And Fred, going back to...
Okay.
Will, just so you know,
guys, if we can argue.
Fred,
not here.
Have a conversation, go outside, please. We have business to carry on.
We're not really...
I do have a question on the foil with that 239 for.
I think you did a fantastic job.
Maybe that, I would like to address that. You're not gonna get that FOIL, the 239 review, for the planning. You're not gonna get the FOIL for the 239 review, because it doesn't exist.
And why doesn't it exist?
It doesn't exist because the chairman of the planning committee at the time failed to send it to the county for a 239 review.
So by declaratory judgment by the Court of Appeals, wouldn't the 2007 laws be invalid?
I don't believe so.
You know,
There's a 6-year statute of limitations for declaratory judgment.
Because,
you know, this has been thrown before us time and again, and obviously, there was procedural errors in adopting that zoning bylaw in 2007. And I think that I would suggest that we take action to rescind that amendment and go back to the way that the zoning ordinance was prior to 2007.
Lawrence, I'm sorry, but I could not hear what you said.
I said that because of the procedural errors.
Should be a little different down here, don't it?
I recommend that we go back to.
Good night.
Take effort, take action to rescind that amendment. Go back to the zoning ordinance.
Can I say something on that? The fact that it doesn't exist may or may not be, it might, maybe it was done, and maybe it didn't get to the county, maybe it didn't go to the county. We aren't sure, but the Department of State receives those changes, looks them over after we've had our town vote, and the Department of State gave us approval that was the new local law.
if I could just interject, our town attorney did as well. And one more thing, and I'll tell you the person to blame is you're looking at him. I failed to send it to the county.
But we were sending.
I'm way ahead of 239 review.
I understand that. I don't expect an admission, is all I'm trying to do is find out how we can protect ourselves.
The town does not need the county's approval to pass that amendment. As the village certainly approved with a super majority vote, they overruled the county's recommendation. Well, correct me if I'm mistaken, Lawrence, I wasn't on the board at the time, but I don't think there were any dissenting votes at that time.
I believe that's true, without looking at that.
Without looking at the records. So I don't believe that law is invalid at all. It was a procedural mistake. The county, the state attorneys looked at it, the town attorney looked at it, all gave their approval, the board passed it. I should have sent it up previous.
Can I respond to you? Didn't Roger Monaco, the town attorney, 12 months to the day, on August 20th of 2008, inform the board that the laws were unenforceable and invalid regarding laws number 1, the gas drilling? Is that correct or not?
I don't recall that. He did say that?
And didn't you receive, which has gone missing, a letter from the DEC on October 17th, 2007, addressed to Lawrence Wilcox, stating that for the first time in 34 years, a gas drilling rig was coming in to drill a well. The permit was being applied for on October 17th, 2007. 8 months later, they drilled that well. You were there and he was there. The rest of you folks are out of this. Nobody lifted a finger to confront the gas drilling company to exercise our laws. And if you had read this document that came from the state, on the permitting page, number 10, it states, the permittee is responsible for obtaining any other permits, approvals, lands, easements, and rights-of-way that may be required by this permit. I confirmed with the DEC, and I got a letter back from the District 7, the big wig, and it says, Mr. Brennan, the drilling permit condition that you referenced means that the permittee, that's the driller, is not relieved of its responsibilities to obtain any other necessary permits or approvals by the issuance of the DEC permit. And it would be up to the permittee to deal with the local governments regarding their laws. They never did it, and you guys never did anything. So how do we feel secure with the floodgates opening, and this is what a couple of single verticals are.
Okay, this needs to end here. I'm not familiar with the time frame of that permit or whatever. I don't think that our zoning changes are invalid due to what I stated.
Let me
So I
say
wanted
one more
to-
thing.
No, that's, we have other business to conduct.
Okay,
I wanted to respond to that.
okay, let me just ask Lawrence, you gonna make a motion, were you, about reverting back to the 2000?
I didn't make a motion, no, I didn't.
Were you gonna, or is that
I don't know what I was.
Why don't you? It would resolve a lot of problems.
Because my concern is the residential areas, and you guys gotta admit, there's no compatibility between gas drilling and residential districts. And it's absolutely ludicrous that you're gonna think that we're gonna special permit that.
I think that we spent almost an hour on this issue.
All right, I'm sorry. Well, chew it over.